To tell us about what they've learned along the way, we have a returning keynoter here at Media Post, Rob Barrett. He's the president of media at the Arena Group. He's one of the real veterans of digital and the print world. Before coming to Arena, he was the president of digital at Hearst Newspapers, where he spoke here before. But before that, he had careers with Yahoo, with Tribune Company, and, remember this, Prime Media. Please welcome back Rob Barrett.
Steve. It's great to be here. I'm had a long night getting here, but I'm fully awake now. It's actually I really enjoyed being at this summit before, and really wanted to do it again. I thought about Steve mentioned NFTs and streaming and all these things that a lot of us are working on and with, and I thought about the space that I'm in now with the Arena Group, and really the competitive set, the emerging model, or people tend to think of roll-ups, the Dotdash, Merediths, Recurrent Ventures just raised a large round, and there's something, what's interesting for me about this space of putting together media brands and actually maybe launching some organic ones is that to a greater degree than I think at traditional media companies with their ownership structure and decision-making, you get to put together a recipe. So, we're working, we're doing NFTs, we're doing, all kinds of, have all kinds of initiatives around streaming, but putting this recipe together and tuning it up to, as Steve said, kind of take back, some of the growth momentum and play in the playing field that we now live in. So, TikTok, not the enemy. We're finding ways to monetize TikTok and convert. Still primarily converting on the O&O platform, but increasingly converting off platform. But so the Arena Group is at first glance, we've got Sports Illustrated, The Street, we acquired Parade, and Parade.com was really the key part of that acquisition, which had on its own grown a considerable audience in the last few years. But what we're really doing is not just putting brands together. You hear a lot about the playbook. So, think about the Dotdash Meredith playbook and Evergreen and Affiliate. What we found here is that there's an opportunity with these brands to create the playbook as we go based on some fundamentals that I think have been working, through the history of this company. And every one of these companies putting together brands is doing a little bit differently with maybe some common core lessons. And what I was going to go through quickly is how this has evolved at the Arena Group, what we're doing now, and how we've managed to create growth by taking a lot of tried and true tactics, adding them in. But what we've really done is create a growth engine by tuning up what we do every day and having people operating with a sort of angle of attack of looking at the data, pivoting, changing, and that mindset is actually what's been the most rewarding here, and that's what's created the growth. And as we do that, we have now developed a pretty effective playbook for growth with multiple revenue streams, and that playbook, I'm sure, will be different and augmented in 6 months, maybe even next month, definitely in a year. But these are representative of the current brands we have. Some examples there: Sports Illustrated, is the largest brand that we have, but is definitely a brand that had been in need of transformation. We've got many, if not most, of the senior journalists that have been at SI through, for the last several years, sometimes more than the last several years. I was the first person on Time.com, and I'm in the 90s, and now I'm working with a couple people I worked with back then. The Street has gone through a complete transformation post Jim Cramer. The audience is probably about 10x what it was last fall. Parade has been very effective at growing through Evergreen and search, and now we're adding some of the rest of our playbook to it, working with a team, a number of whom are based here in Nashville and terrific. And then Fan Nation is representative of an organic network that we have built and attached to Sports Illustrated with independent publishers that are now inside a sports arena and doing local sites to augment what Sports Illustrated does. The Spun has been an extremely successful acquisition for us. Started as a college football and basketball site, with some very, very gifted people who actually had their own growth playbook. We've incorporated that into what we're doing. And then we have some legacy clients like the A&E sites, historyandbiography.com, that simply play on our platform. A little bit of the anatomy, I think, of what we've been doing is tied to the history of the company. It was formerly Maven. It was really a SaaS play, a platform in which independent publishers could migrate on. They could migrate onto it. They didn't really have to have any back office operations. All they had to do was create editorial content. Our direct and programmatic team did the sales. We maintained the stack. We did everything. And so sites like the 105 Fan Nation sites were built on that model. But everything changed when Sports Illustrated entered into the picture, and it opened up a new world for us. It allowed us to take these sites, which we had either built or migrated onto our platform, attach them to the si.com domain. That enhanced our direct sales capability. We have a lot of synergy with these sites and the SI staff. They are able to do things that our core staff does not do. They go deeper, they go local. And as we evolve our platform and optimize ad maps and other things, they benefit from all that core work they simply couldn't participate or reap the benefits from if they were independent. So bringing them on platform around these brands, scaling them along with more partnerships. So we went out after we did Fan Nation and started adding more and more sites. And then finally, as we optimize for RPM on the page, optimize our direct sales approach, add new capabilities, we've really seen not only growth in audience, but really growth in yield and overall financial performance. And on the audience side, this is I keep looking here, I'm sorry. On the audience side, this is representative of what's happened, not just in the last few years, but even the last few months. So Sports Illustrated, what we did, we learned from the Spun and from the Fan Nation sites who are really, really good native audience players. And then we started looking at operations like breaking news at Sports Illustrated. And we're able to actually grow really fast by cross-pollinating all the best practices from everyone. And so you can see, sort of that growth over that period. The Street is probably about 10x the audience now that it was last September. Jim Cramer, who was one of the co-founders of the site, moved to participate fully with CNBC. We brought in a new editorial team. We aimed at a broader and younger audience than the Street has ever had. And we're actually enjoying the fruits of all that labor. The Street has a very vibrant audience now. We've moved into new areas, including crypto. We're finding there are new advertising and sponsorship opportunities and new monetization opportunities with that. The other examples here, I mentioned Fan Nation. I'll go a little bit later into Fadeaway World and Pet Helpful. These are new. Fadeaway World is a new channel that we started organically in the sports network, and Pet Helpful is a vertical site that we were able to grow very dramatically with very few resources, and I'll explain how we did that. Again, how do we look at performance? We onboard the assets, we bring our playbook in, take the performance up, and then we keep adding scale to the sports arena, the investing arena. With Parade, that will be an anchor of a lifestyle arena, some of which will be a buildup of Parade.com and some of which will be additions to the lifestyle business. And you can see on monetization, by looking across these categories, by having a common platform approach, we bring a lot of consistency to the monetization that wouldn't be possible if we had just aggregated all these sites together, had them on all different platforms, had to have all that friction of everybody's different. So there are clear core benefits of being on a common platform, although we are able to export some of these benefits to partners who are not on the platform. And this is a little bit of a schematic of how the vertical works. The idea is that we have 3 arenas right now. We have sports, investing, and lifestyle. We intend to add several more, each with an anchor brand that people know that helps drive direct sales, CPMs, domain authority, and then we bring strategic partners in. We then have the independent publishers we call entrepreneurial publishers. These are people that make a full living running 1 or more channels on our platform inside an arena. the person who runs, the entrepreneur who runs our Cowboys site is on SI.com. He runs probably 7 channels now. He has a staff. He has no overhead. He does what he does best. We do what we do best. And we're starting now to integrate work from people like that into our coverage of NFL Draft, team pages, things like that. And then finally, we do in the network in our ComScore groups have other publishers both on and off the platform that help us grow the scale. So in SI in particular, I've explained a little bit of this, but in that sports world, we have examples. Sports Illustrated has been fairly light on hockey coverage compared to how it used to be. And rather than hire a hockey, staff to cover hockey, we work with partners like Hockey News to build that up. We still do it out of Sports Illustrated, but we find strong partners who can actually augment what we can do, which allowed us to concentrate more on NFL, which is our main shop. Morning Read, similar position for golf. So a lot of our Masters coverage and other tournament PGA came from Morning Read, but we still do it with Sports Illustrated and we work together. Fan Nation, now 105 sites, that's growing. We found that actually curating the network to be not necessarily the biggest it can be, but the best it can be. We had 200 at one point. We winnowed it down to the 80 best performing partners, and we started building it up with a formula that we saw was more successful. Spun, I mentioned, really a phenomenal performer. CEO of the Spun, Matt Lombardi, is now spearheading a lot of our growth efforts. These were people that ran one site for years. They looked at optimizing across channels. They wrote what the audience responded to, and it's been an invaluable acquisition, and now we're working more broadly with some of their tactics as well. And then there are others, Athlon Sports, which we actually now own because of the Parade acquisition. The company we bought was Athlon, that had owned Parade, is helping us fill in gaps on NFL, and they also have a print business that is actually profitable and we think sustainable. I'll mention this briefly just because we had a big event with the swimsuit issue a couple weeks ago with Kim Kardashian and Elon Musk's mother May on the cover and Ciara and others. Part of the sports operation is the swimsuit issue, but we've actually managed to, they have been under the leadership of MJ Day, the editor, been moving very aggressively toward becoming a lifestyle brand and being inclusive and body positive. So they've really changed who they put on the cover, who they've included, and we found, though, that it is possible to build a community, and one of the, around this on our model as well. And we started building it out in lifestyle categories. There's some synergy with Parade. And the women who've participated in the swimsuit issue over the years are very dedicated to the brand. In many cases, it actually helped make their careers. And they are really a set of independent, successful entrepreneurs who work on the influencer model. Each of them, I'd say a majority of them, has a successful business on Instagram or other platforms, and we are now working together to build a community around these lifestyle topics. Fadeaway World is a really interesting case to me of what we can do organically. So we were able to build the channel. We didn't buy it, we didn't acquire it, we didn't roll it up. We took the talent that we had, and we launched a new channel to do this, and we started publishing on the schedule that worked for us. We saw an ability, the opportunity to augment our coverage, and this has been one of the top performing channels in the entire network. And this is something that we can rinse and repeat and do more, but we have a good sense of what kind of talent to work with, where to hire, where the gaps are, and how we can grow fast. So again, we've evolved a bit of a formula in terms of publishing frequency, what channels, how we monetize, and one of the big drivers of upside in the company is the ability to fill in gaps and launch new channels like this, not just acquire. Sort of the sleeper hit was Pet Helpful. There is a company within the company called Hub Pages that Paul Edmondson, our president of Platform, founded. It's a lot of micro verticals. It's on an interesting model where there's a revenue share with the writers. So Pet Helpful was one of about 40 sites that had been performing nicely, not that big, sort of pet enthusiast, obviously a space with a lot of potential in audience and commerce. So we decided to focus on it as we saw other techniques emerging that were gaining us audience around trending, features, other topics that were hitting, better monetization, and literally in the space of a few weeks, we were able to put it on the path to being possibly the largest pet site on the internet. With not very many people, it mattered who we brought in. It mattered what cadence they had in the writing. It mattered us having an organic sense of what would play very well, mattered. So we brought what we had learned in every other vertical into this. We did the casting very well, and now we're working across the rest of the Hub Pages sites to build up properties that may inherently be more valuable than an acquisition we might do. And so in the end, I think there's a playbook that has multiple threads woven through it. We can work NFTs into this, and we're doing that with some of the brands, including SI. We're moving with some close partners into a syndication model as we produce more content. Clearly, the company's always had a strong foundation in search and evergreen, and so we're building that out significantly, and that model is a model that I believe in strongly, and you see evidence with some of the other players of moving to have a hedge model with display and an affiliate and other commerce models. New verticals. In sports, obviously, there's a gambling play, and we work closely with Authentic Brands on SI Sportsbook and other ventures based on the SI brand. And then we're going to keep expanding into new verticals and deepen the ones that we have, better monetize them, both organic and acquisition. And our growth path has been terrific this year. We've had a great year, and we think that even with the climate as it's emerging and the slowing of the growth of the ad spend, we have a lot of upside with this build mode to keep building more and more inventory and actually keep ourselves on a path to a very high rate of growth. So I think, do we have any time for, okay?
Here we go. Thank you so much, Rob. If we have time, time for questions throughout the event. If you have a question, please raise your hand. I'll get the mic to you. Stand, tell us who you are and who you're with. All right. A little blind over here. Wave your hand. There you go. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle from shefinds.com. I'm wondering about this revenue sharing with the writers and how you do that, because that sounds like a really good incentive thing, but it seems like a hard thing to do.
It's a great question. There are a couple different models that we have, and one, I mentioned the Fan Nation Network. That was actually built on a rev share model. So the genesis of the company was to grow a network fast and to split the revenue with these independent publishers who are both writers and heads of their own business. And so the benefit of that, obviously, is that we have zero cost of content. We can grow the network really fast, and we split it, and then they have a business. The challenge in the model is if that's all we did, then we'd be giving away the upside down the road. So that's why we have a hedged model where on our core O&Os, we hire people, we create content, we fill in gaps or augment with these kinds of partnerships. And we found that initially when I got to the company a year and 3 months ago, not all the growth, but the triple-digit growth in sports was coming from Fan Nation. These were people that really understood their communities. They had this native audience capability, whereas Sports Illustrated had a really strong base, but was not growing as fast. And so what we've done is taken lessons from those partners and sort of the other internal playbook that we developed and applied that to the O&O. Now we've learned things in the O&O that we can take back to them. But the idea is that I think we maintain that model. It's a good partial model. It allows us to expand quickly, so there are opportunities with brands like Parade to go, for example, local, and to do it much more quickly than if we just had to hire people. There's another model, and Parade actually had pursued this independently, and Hub Pages did, in which if we want certain topics, certain channels, we would essentially put out a bid and say who wants to write this, and then the writer would have a revenue share. In the case of Hub Pages and Parade, a lifetime revenue share on the RPM of the page. There were different formulas even within our company and Parade on how that worked. And so what we've done is focused a lot on how to tune that up so that it's optimal for them and optimal for us. There were nuances to it, certain evergreen categories we really want to own, and certain other content we think is fine to have partners own and rev share for life.
You're describing a lot of moving pieces. Could you tell us a little bit about how you've organized internally you've got a lot of partners you have to manage, a lot of independent providers, both writers and site hosts. What have you learned about organizing internally to manage all those relationships?
It's a great question. We've actually evolved the organization to keep things moving in the direction of simplicity, I think. So we have a full partnership organization that actually is full-time on managing these partners. They're obviously tied into the editors of the O&O properties too, but there is sort of a lead partnership manager for Fan Nation. You know, there are others for the other networks that we're building. And there is a lot of care and feeding, but operationally it's very, very simple. I think the real work is to find more, and it's to make sure that things are working with the current partners so that they're not, if they have ideas, or if they think their performance could be better, that we are talking with them all day long. So you definitely need to staff partnership there. And it's a combination of business development function and sort of partnership management. The company's organized in a matrix. My function is really sort of a GM-like function across that. So I've got the P&L, the cross-functional teams roll in, and as we build out these verticals and these broader arenas, everyone's represented: product, marketing, editorial leads, and we've got very specific plans for each one. But what we've done every time is move toward a common playbook, and we've got core ownership of that playbook. While there were variations in areas like finance, investing, a lot of very specific things, we have a very talented lead product manager who's been immersed in finance. There's a lot of effort to make sure that the core platform and the core playbook work everywhere. And that kind of discipline is what really drives the growth, that we don't have 10 playbooks, we have one.
Hi, I'm Zach from Condé Nast. Those are really impressive audience growth numbers. I think a lot of publishers are seeing flagging traffic based on changing consumer behavior year over year in the pandemic, changes in the platforms and in search. So curious if you can talk about some specific tactics that are working for you guys to drive that growth. I saw something about using syndication to jumpstart Google Discover and those kinds of things. And then also, second question around the Sports Illustrated swimsuit community you're trying to build. Are you treating those models as essentially contributors where they're going to be paid in a similar model to a writer, essentially, so they're incentivized to be part of this community? And what's the model with those entrepreneurs as you described?
Maybe if I take them in reverse order. I mean, the model with swim is emerging, and I think it's a special case in which these women are very successful entrepreneurs in their own right. And so the opportunity there, I think, is to do some common things around the brand that they believe in, that they're very fond of. So it's a little bit, but it's also, there's a piece that I didn't talk about, and I think a lot of people are starting to play in this space. There is an opportunity for branded content working with influencers, which is actually something we're doing in all of our areas. They happen to have built-in followings. Most of them are, fairly well-known. And so I look at them a little bit as an influencer partnership more than someone who's operating a web channel. And one of the growth axes for this whole thing is we're actually playing and have grown significantly. We've had triple-digit growth on all social channels. And while not all of them are directly monetizable, monetizing them around a branded content strategy is a big piece of where we're going. And I know some others in the room and elsewhere have actually gone pretty far down that road. So to me, it's more of an influencer model in that case, but it ties in, but our platform is sort of a tailwind toward that. On the overall growth, I think it's been, I think we've become smart internally about load balancing across channels. There are certain, some channels that convert and some that don't, and then Discover and Facebook feed and others generally do. And so we look very hard at really what's played every single day. I'd say that when we hit the point of growth. It's less that someone is actually looking at data and doing something, and more that they've started to internalize the trends behind the data and have an innate sense of what's working. But generally, mapping to channels like Discover has been very helpful. There are certain things that tend to play very well in these. So in some ways, it's old-fashioned audience development, and in other ways, it's constantly sort of changing up our emphasis on how much on this channel, this month, and how do you redial it? And part of that is obviously the algos are going to change and evolve, but search has been steady. We've all lived through big changes in search, but search is still there and dominant. And there are Discover is an augmentation of that with mobile behavior, but Facebook is a key part of it. But it's diversified enough that we're constantly looking at, should we be changing, de-emphasizing, should we be ready? But having people that are adaptive and having as many legs to the stool as possible is it's just more of a mindset, I think. But we had to have, we've got a very good sort of data infrastructure to monitor all this, so it isn't just ad-libbing and doing smart things. There is a playbook that we literally augment based on how we're performing on specific channels, and we have clear ownership of that playbook and the growth strategy.
I have a quick question before we end about the data strategy. Now, most of this is, most of your users are not coming in and necessarily logging in. So I'm curious, what's the data strategy here? How much first-party data are you getting off of them, and how much are you relying on it? And what then becomes the post-cookie strategy? Well,
like everyone, we're doing a lot of work for post-cookie. There are some parts of the business that are deep in first-party by nature of what they are. The street is actually a heavily subscription-oriented business. We've now added that much larger audience to it, and so there's a lot of work internally on what content converts versus who are flybys, and the ability to look at trends in terms of who can we get more engagement out of another view, and who might be who can we bring into a progressive registration strategy. So I think we're in the same boat as everybody else, but we have been working through for non-subscribers, breaking down the wall between sort of paywalled, hard paywalled, and the free content. We've increasingly promoted, in the case of the street, paid content outside the paywall as part of a funnel strategy. On the overall strategy, we're finding nice repeat visit patterns when we go very vertical in sports. You tend to get a lot of repeat visits around the Cowboys. More broadly on general news, less so. I didn't talk much about affiliate commerce, but obviously that's a core strategy for any publisher at scale right now. And as we go more, we're balancing news, trending news, and evergreen as we move into Parade and more fully develop it. There's a great potential for more evergreen, which is a space that I'm familiar with. So how we, along those paths, there are lots of ways to capture more first-party data, but we're focusing currently on repeat visitors and where we can start to do that and get the most traction first.
Rob Barrett, thank you so much.
Thank you.